They say empires fall by the sword, but sometimes they decay from within the bedroom. Before you judge this story, know that every word is documented by Roman historians. In 48 AD, Roman soldiers burst into the palace gardens and found the Empress of Rome, the most powerful woman in the world, on her knees, covered in dirt and tears, begging for her life. But this wasn't a political coup. This wasn't war. This was the final hour of a woman who had turned the Roman Empire into her personal pleasure den, a woman who disguised herself as a prostitute and challenged Rome's most famous courtesan to a contest of endurance. Her name was Valyria Messalina, and by the time the blade pierced her chest, she had destroyed families, enslaved senators through shame, and married another man while still empress. Rome tried to erase her from history. They smashed her statues, scratched out her name. But 2,000 years later, we're still whispering about the woman who proved that empires don't just fall to swords. They rot from the bedroom. The year is 38 CE. Imagine the scene. Marble columns glowing under Mediterranean sun, incense curling through the air, the most powerful men in the world gathered in silk togas, watching a 15-year-old girl walk toward her destiny. Her name was Valyria Messalina, born into Roman nobility, raised to be perfect. Golden hair that caught the light like spun honey. Skin so pale it seemed carved from marble. Eyes that Roman poets would later describe as dangerous. She was marrying Emperor Claudius, a man more than twice her age, limping, stammering, brilliant but frail. To Rome, this marriage was a salvation. After the madness of Caligula, after the bloodshed and chaos, finally a young, fertile empress of noble blood to restore dignity to the throne. The Senate smiled, the people cheered. No one suspected the truth. They had just invited a serpent into the heart of the empire. At first, Messalina played her role flawlessly. She gave Claudius 2 children, Britannicus and Octavia, securing the dynasty. She attended state ceremonies, draped in modest robes, head bowed, the perfect Roman matrona, the virtuous wife. But Rome had rules. Strict, suffocating rules. A woman of her status existed in 2 categories, the chaste wife or the common prostitute. There was no middle ground, no freedom, no power of her own. And Messalina, she was allergic to cages. Historians still debate why she did what she did. Was it rebellion against a marriage she never chose? Was it the thrill of danger? Or was it something darker? A hunger for control, for domination, for proving that she could break every rule and still remain untouchable. Whatever the reason, Rome was about to meet a woman who weaponized desire. Here's where the story becomes almost unbelievable. According to Tacitus, one of Rome's most reliable historians, Messalina began slipping out of the palace at night. Not for romantic rendezvous, not for political intrigue. She went to work in a brothel. Let that sink in. The Empress of Rome, dripping in jewels by day, disguised herself with cheap perfume and grease paint by night, and walked into the Suburra, Rome's filthiest district, to work alongside common prostitutes. But this wasn't desperation. This was competition. Ancient sources claim She issued a challenge to Rome's most famous courtesan, a woman named Sylla, known across the empire for her endurance. Messalina bet she could outlast her. The contest began at dusk. By dawn, Sylla had served 25 men
say she left
and collapsed
unsatisfied.
in exhaustion. Messalina, she didn't stop until she reached 30. And even then, witnesses say, she left unsatisfied, frustrated there were no men left. Imagine the scene. Senators stumbling into that brothel for a secret night of pleasure, only to lock eyes with the Empress beneath the lamplight. The shock. The terror. The realization that she now owned them. Because that's what Messalina understood better than anyone. Sexual shame is the most powerful weapon in politics. Every man who recognized her became her prisoner. Every whispered secret became leverage. Every humiliating encounter became a chain she could pull whenever she needed a vote, a favor, a life destroyed. She wasn't just indulging her desires. She was building an empire of blackmail. But the brothel visits were just the beginning. Inside the palace, Messalina transformed the court of Emperor Claudius into something Rome had never seen, a theater of orchestrated degradation. Picture this: lavish banquets with golden platters piled with exotic delicacies, wine flowing like rivers, senators reclining on silk couches, trying to maintain dignity, while the Empress prowled among them like a predator selecting prey. She would summon gladiators fresh from the arena, their bodies still slick with sweat and blood. She'd call in captured prisoners from distant provinces. She even invited the noble sons and daughters of Rome's elite, not as guests, but as performers. Ancient accounts describe ceremonies disguised as religious festivals, celebrations for Venus, goddess of love, or Bacchus, god of wine. They would begin solemnly, with incense and prayers. Then the robes would come off. Messalina orchestrated what could only be called forced orgies. Spectacles where senators were paired with their rivals, where aristocratic women were unveiled before crowds, where generals were made to compete in contests so degrading that historians still hesitate to describe them in detail. Refusal was not an option. A tribune who spurned her advances was found floating in the Tiber River the next morning. A senator who tried to leave early had his estates confiscated overnight. A noble family that shielded their daughter from her summons watched their son mysteriously die in a training accident. The message was crystal clear. The Empress does not accept no. But here's the truly chilling part. Messalina wasn't just destroying lives for pleasure. She was collecting leverage. Every shameful act was witnessed. Every compromising moment was recorded by her loyal attendants. She created dossiers on Rome's most powerful men, their secrets, their perversions, their moments of weakness, and then she used them. Governorships went to those she had blackmailed, military appointments to those who had been broken in her chambers. Rome's policies twisted under her invisible hand, shaped not by law or debate, but by who had been humiliated the most. One soldier who escaped her villa said something haunting. Blood dries, shame never does. As the years passed, Messalina's operation grew more sophisticated and more dangerous. She established what historians now call an imperial brothel, a lavish villa near the Campus Martius, hidden in plain sight. This wasn't a house of common lust. It was a machine designed to corrupt, control, and conquer. Aristocratic women were coerced under threat of ruin to work alongside her. Senators and generals arrived under false pretenses, invited to private councils or confidential meetings, only to find themselves trapped in compromising situations with witnesses ready to testify. Every secret whispered in passion became ammunition. Think about the human cost. A young noblewoman dragged from her father's home, forced to play the courtesan while Messalina watched. A senator stripped of his toga, the symbol of Roman citizenship and honor, compelled into degrading acts before rivals who would exploit his shame for decades. Families destroyed, careers ended, lives shattered, and through it all, Emperor Claudius remained oblivious, complicit. Historians still argue. Some say he was too focused on building aqueducts and conquering Britain to notice. Others suggest he knew but felt powerless against a woman who had Rome's elite by the throat. A few even whisper he was complicit, that the awkward, limping emperor enjoyed watching the arrogant Senate brought low. Whatever the truth, Rome was rotting from within. The soldiers, men who had faced Germanic tribes and survived sieges, began to mutter in the barracks. Loyalty frayed when they heard their commanders had been summoned to Messalina's villa and returned different. Hollow, broken. For warriors who valued honor above life, humiliation was worse than death. Her paranoia swelled. Guards tightened. Punishments grew harsher. The spectacles turned crueler, as if doubling the shame could strangle rebellion. Each act cut new cracks into the fragile facade of her dominion of desire. And then came the act so insane, so bold, that it still stuns historians 2,000 years later. In the autumn of 48 CE, while Emperor Claudius was away inspecting the grain supply in Ostia, Messalina did the unthinkable. She married another man. Not a secret ceremony, not a whispered vow in the dark. A full, legal, public Roman wedding to her lover, Senator Gaius Silius, one of the most handsome and ambitious men in Rome. Priests presided. Witnesses signed. Contracts were sealed. She wore the bridal veil. He wore the toga of a groom. Wine was poured. Oaths were spoken before the gods. Every legal requirement Rome demanded was met. Which meant, in the eyes of Roman law, the Empress of Rome, still married to Claudius, had just committed bigamy, adultery, and treason all at once. What was she thinking? Some historians believe she and Silius were planning a coup. That with Claudius aging and unpopular with the Senate, they could seize power. Others think it was pure compulsion, that Messalina had escalated so far, broken so many taboos, that only complete self-destruction could satisfy her. Maybe she thought she was untouchable, that Rome was so enslaved by shame and blackmail that no one would dare oppose her. She was wrong. Loyal freedmen, former slaves who owed everything to Claudius, ran to Ostia with the news. At first, the emperor laughed. Surely this was a wild rumor, another piece of court gossip. But as proof mounted, signed documents, eyewitness testimony, legal contracts. Laughter turned to rage. For the first time in years, Claudius acted. He returned to Rome with the Praetorian Guard at his back. Soldiers flooded the palace. Messalina fled to the gardens, the same gardens where she had hosted her decadent festivals, and collapsed among the flowers. Ancient writers describe her final moments with cold precision. She begged, she wept, she offered her children as hostages. She swore to return to virtue, to be the perfect wife. Claudius didn't even come to face her. He sent a soldier with a simple order. Messalina tried to take her own life, raising a dagger to her throat, but her hand trembled. She couldn't do it. So the soldier did it for her. The woman who had enslaved Rome through shame died in panic and blood, alone except for her mother, who held her as the blade went in. She was 22 years old. Rome tried to erase her. Claudius ordered her statues toppled and smashed. Her name was chiseled out of inscriptions, a punishment called damnatio memoria, the condemnation of memory. Her children were forbidden from speaking of her. Official histories barely mentioned her existence. But they failed, because you can't erase a story this shocking. You can't bury a scandal this deep. Tacitus wrote about her. Suetonius chronicled her excesses. Juvenal mocked her in poetry that Romans recited for centuries. Even when they condemned her, they couldn't stop talking about her. And here we are, 2,000 years later, still whispering her name. So what's the lesson? Messalina's story isn't just about sex or scandal. It's a warning carved across centuries. Empires don't only fall to armies. They rot from corruption that festers in secret chambers. She proved that lust can be as destructive as war. That shame can bind men tighter than chains. That when power meets perversion, entire civilizations can crumble. Walk through the ruins of the Palatine Hill today. Stand where the palace once towered over Rome. The mosaics are faded. The columns are cracked. Tourists snap photos and move on. But the stones remember. They remember the girl bride who became Rome's most feared courtesan. They remember the empress who turned the Senate into her brothel. They remember the woman who proved that the most dangerous weapon in history isn't the sword. It's the bedroom. Valyria Messalina died young, condemned, and terrified. But her shadow still stretches across the empire. If you found this story shocking, wait until you hear what happened to Messalina's daughter, Octavia, who was forced to marry the Emperor Nero. That's a story of fire, madness,